their people, but also to feed NBC, particularly NBC, and the other networks with their news, which certainly isn't going to have the fact that progressives are responsible for wiping out $100 billion in wealth that African Americans had until they got into the act. So, thank you.
Because we're being taped, we're going to ask everyone to line up and ask questions from the microphone. Carl, you'll be first, so please make a line if you want to ask a question. Thank you.
David, that's positively the most depressing talk I've ever heard. Surely there must be some bright line, but the IRS, your proposed remedy, the IRS, I understand, has just cracked down on conservative organizations to try to compel them to divulge their donor lists.
Oh, of course, because, look, as I've said this before, the left, which includes liberals, progressives, communists, radicals, anarchists, they're on a mission to change the world. And it's not small changes we're talking about. They're on a mission to create the kingdom of heaven on earth, to create a classless, raceless society where there's no war and no poverty and so forth. So for them, everything is political, and they don't respect anything. When Democrats are in the White House, conservative foundations have to worry. My little 501c3 was audited. When Hillary was in the White House, she went after all the people who concocted the story that her husband was cheating on her. That's where the vast right-wing conspiracy comes from. The people forget. That's their mentality, and that's a real problem. But in November, we're going to take back all three branches of government, and I'm hoping that Republicans will have the attention span and the cojones to actually do something about this. We had for 12 years, we could have done this, and nothing was done. Nothing. These foundations weren't looked at. It's a disenfranchisement of the American people. There are plenty of Mexican Americans who don't want open borders, who don't want illegals coming here and competing with them for jobs. But they don't have a vote like the Ford Foundation does.
Just one aspect. Do you think the Citizens United decision has any tie-in with this, and it may be one of the bright lights on the horizon?
Well, this is a basic battle between individual rights, the rights of individuals to assemble, to organize, to have a voice, and the collectivist idea that we're going to control you. And yes, I think that the Citizens United decision was a great decision, and that it has obviously it's freed up a lot of funds, but they're going into elections, and it's the trench warfare between elections that it determines the framework. It would have been unthinkable 30 years ago to be talking about undocumented immigrants when you're talking about illegals. Nobody in his right mind would have talked about that. I'll give you another example, which is Obamacare. It failed in the Clinton administration. When Gore ran, he was against it because it was so unpopular. When Kerry ran, he was against it because it was obviously unpopular. When Obama ran, if you'll remember, he said government control is wrong and private is wrong, right? Yet it became the centerpiece right in the middle of an economic crisis. Instead of jobs, it was Obamacare. Because for the left, that is the door to the socialist future. And it was totally ideological. It was not political in the normal sense of politics. It didn't make any kind of sense in terms of what the country was facing. But it was pushed through, and it was pushed through by these foundations. We describe this in the book, by these foundations.
David, with the possible exception of the Bill Gates Foundation, most of the foundations, the humongous ones, were founded by people who obviously believed in free enterprise. How did the left take over those organizations?
I give you an example of one which was, I think, kind of stalled. There's a foundation, a $2 billion foundation, the Daniels Fund in Colorado, which we mentioned in our book. And it was formed by a very conservative gentleman. And the people who, the board of the foundation wanted to run a professional foundation. So where do they turn? The Ford Foundation, because the Ford Foundation has, school, and before they knew it, they had a whole staff of leftists. I happen to know people on the board. We applied. Conservative applicants were, dismissed, and so forth. And this happened in part just because of that, because there hasn't been enough publicity about what the Ford Foundation actually does and what these other foundations do. Information is a huge problem. And the second thing is there are always going to be family members who have, strayed from the founder. They didn't make the money. They probably feel guilty for being rich. There's not, it's not just white guilt. There's just guilt. It's class guilt. Plays a big role in this. The Rockefellers, were a pretty conservative American family. Peter Collier and I did a book on the Rockefellers. So 30 years ago, I interviewed Stephen Rockefeller, who was then a philosophy professor at the University of Vermont. He told me, he said, I'm a socialist. Now he's the head of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which is a huge foundation, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they fund radicals.
How would one safeguard against such usurpation?
I don't think you really can. If you're leaving money, it's a huge problem unless you provide for sunsetting the foundation. You can't foresee what's going to go on through three generations. I think that's why I like the idea of redefining what's political, and just saying if it's political dollars, you're not going to get the tax exemption. You've got to just give to charity, and which would be hospitals. I don't want to devise a reform while I'm standing here. I'm sure that some wise heads can figure out the problematic areas like education, but I think that's the basic solution. The other is you got to sunset it. You can't have wealth existing in perpetuity. And what's the problem with giving it away while you're alive?
Hello, David. You touched on La Raza, MALDEF, and all these open borders groups and their might. Recently, we have this declaration by Mr. Obama. There's two parts to this. Can you reflect on why the media seems to be unable to handle any aspect of illegal immigration other than to talk about some woolly-eyed view of someone who was brought here when they were 8? And wouldn't it be nice to be nice to them? There's no talk about emergency rooms filled with illegals, no talk about public schools filled with illegals. Chain migration and things of this nature never gets discussed.
Because it's racist. That's the left. Look at if I may just throw back, since I was a kid when this was happening and my parents were communists, but the McCarthy era. There was a Washington Post article by Nicholas von Hoffman which told the simple truth, which is that 99% of the people who McCarthy interrogated were communists. That means they were part of an international conspiracy. They wanted America to lose the Cold War. They wanted one of the most monstrous regimes in history to triumph over America. So whatever else you can say about McCarthy, he was onto something. I've written, critical stuff about his methods and this, and he discredited the cause. But the fact is, there was a huge internal communist threat. But the left has made McCarthy is the devil, not the communists. I just watched a 2-hour, oh, I didn't watch it, but I came across a 2-hour celebration of a communist hack named Pete Seeger, whom Bill Clinton gave a Medal of Freedom Award to. And, the Communist Party, it's just part of Americana, which is what you will learn in any liberal arts college practically in the country today. That's the problem. So people in the media are scared. I mean, anybody, even the ones who know what's going on, are scared too. Well, there's two things that go on. One is they're scared. They don't want to be tarred and feathered, which happens to anybody. Yeah. The good news is that our kids in college, the ones that speak out, have been tarred and feathered as youngsters, so they're going to be pretty bold when they get into, politics, the Congress, and into media. That's happened already. There's a whole generation of young conservatives who aren't intimidated. But much more intimidated than conservatives are so-called liberals. They're scared because they will be cast into the nether regions. And I can tell you, when I left the left, the most difficult part of it was losing every friend I ever had in midlife. And that's what keeps them there. That's why all the name calling, all these things, you say, how can people, be so rude and so uncivilized as the MSNBC people are? That's why, because it keeps people in line. Oh. The other thing is that they won't tell you the truth because it will hurt the cause. Now, I have been in a green room with Bob Beckel, who has told me that he watched a very significant conservative figure, Coors, write $1 million check to Jesse Jackson because Jackson was threatening to extort him in the beer business. And as you probably know, Jesse Jackson got, by threatening a boycott, that means threatening to call the beer industry racist, got two $30 million distributorships for his sons. So it's extortion, it's intimidation. But why hasn't Beckel told this story? Because he's still partisan of the cause, and he doesn't want to hurt the cause.
Okay, and then on a follow-up to that, which is that I wonder if Mitt Romney would understand that most of America, I'm a worker, most American workers, most American people who pay the taxes, who work, they want to hear about chain migration, they want to hear about what it costs schools, and they want to know about every single aspect of illegal immigration. They get no information about it, and I wonder if you think that Romney, or someone could tell Romney to actually get involved in articulating this and to touch all those third rails.
There's two questions there. I think Romney knows full well what's going on. The other is, Americans will never hear that. If Romney were to talk, of course he wouldn't talk like David Horowitz, but even approach, the reason they call it the third rail is there would be just such a storm of attacks of its bigotry and his this and his that, they would never hear the facts. You never hear the facts. You can just look at what's happened to all of us who have just tried to point out that there's a serious problem with organizations in America like CARE and the Muslim American Society and the Islamic Society of North America. They're all Muslim, and the Muslim Students Association are all Muslim Brotherhood fronts. So we're Islamophobes, bigots. You can see us all over the web. Now, if I were running for office, I mean, that would be a death sentence right there. So it's a very big problem. And that's why I'm thrilled about the emergence of the Tea Party. We need a grassroots movement. That's what the left has done. They have the grassroots movement. It's made the Democratic Party a left-wing party from top to bottom. And we need the Tea Party to, there's another dimension to this, which everybody's aware of, which are these kind of social issues that run this way, and that's a big problem. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be a politician. It's tough. So I don't expect Romney to come out swing on that. And, you know, Marco Rubio